So it's March 9th, 2012. Today is the last day of the 2012 legislative session in the state of Florida. On today's calendar is Senate Bill 1890. The last step in having this abomination, this piece of legislation made into law, is to have the full Senate vote on it, which they're scheduled to do today. The House already greased this abomination through, and so all they're waiting for is the Senate to pass this bill through. Now, the legislation is bad enough as it exists, but one thing that I'm desperately concerned about is if they were able to amend on the so-called finality of foreclosure judgment provision that appeared briefly in committee on both sides, but then had been removed. Now, we'd had assurances that the so-called finality of foreclosure judgment provision would be removed and would not make it back on, but I'm told that it can be amended on at the very last minute. If this happens, if at the last minute they do amend on this finality provision, it will be an absolute abomination that will bring people up in arms. It should in any event. If they do this, this truly will be the last straw. But we need to monitor this and keep focused on what they're trying to do to us there in Tallahassee. Now, one thing that I've been tracking recently that is very, very compelling is what's happening with foreclosure sales. You know, as we're busy focused on the new foreclosure cases or what's happening with the existing foreclosure cases, no one at all is paying attention to what's happening with the old foreclosure cases and the foreclosure sales. I have posted previously some Excel spreadsheets which show what's happening with foreclosure sales here in Pinellas County. And what I find is most curious and in fact very disturbing. I want to draw your attention to those Excel spreadsheets. They come from the website Real Foreclose. That's REAL and the number foreclose.com. They handle many of the foreclosure auctions for counties all across the state of Florida. The thing that is most disturbing about what's happening with foreclosures is that the sales are not actually occurring. There's a huge number of foreclosure cases that are pending. My judge in Pinellas County estimates 28,000 cases pending. They estimate statewide that there are 368,000 cases pending. But here in Pinellas County, the first data set that we'll look at is the auction results from January 1, 2012 to February 29, 2012. You will note that there are a total of 707 foreclosure auction sales that were scheduled and held during that period of time. Now, that is a very low number compared to the total number of pending foreclosure cases, and especially the number of foreclosure cases that have gone undefended. I suspect that the great majority of these sales that occurred were as a result of the rocket docket foreclosure process. Now, unfortunately, this abomination of a legal process is apparently back. We apparently will have this rocket docket again. That's what the legislative funding shows. But what I want to focus on in looking at this Excel spreadsheet, the most disturbing fact, and what you want to do is grab column D, sort it so that we can see who the bidder is on these sales. The most disturbing fact of the foreclosure auctions held during this period of time was that of the 707 sales that occurred, only 99 of them went to third-party bidders. Now, the alleged purpose of a foreclosure case is a foreclosure sale, where at the end of the case, a foreclosure auction would be held, and the real market value would determine what the value of the property is. The real market would determine what the value of the property is because you'd have third-party bidders out there. But what is happening in foreclosure is a perversion of this process because, again, only 99 of the 707 sales made their way into third-party purchasers. The rest of those went back to the banks. And this is very, very curious and very ominous, I believe. There's something happening here where there are perverse incentives for the banks to take these properties back rather than get them out there onto the market. It's unclear at this point in time what those incentives are. Certainly part of the explanation is the banks are concerned about title problems. And so perhaps they're not letting these properties go out to the third-party marketplace because there are problems. But that doesn't explain the full number of these sales here. And frankly, it's buyer beware at a foreclosure auction. So that explanation doesn't hold great weight with me. There's something else occurring here where there are 707 properties here that could go out into the marketplace, that could be liquidated and put back on so that realtors could be selling them and investors could be rehabbing them and selling them, but they're not. And we need to examine why this is occurring. As you look at that sort, the next data set that I think is important is scrolling down. If you've sorted by column D is the bidder sort, and you'll see that beginning at line 100, all of the sales from that point forward go back to the plaintiff. That means that while there may have been third-party purchasers or bidders there at that auction, all of those properties after line 99 went back to the plaintiff. Now, the next curious thing to focus on is look at column E. Column E provides the winning bid amount. You will see that for those 99 sales, there were a number of auctions that were bid up. But what's curious at column E beginning on line 100 is $100 sales reflect that there were no third-party purchasers bidding on that. So whatever the plaintiff's bid was, it went back to the plaintiff for their first bid, or $100. But as you begin scrolling down from line 100 and look at the number of other numbers that are there that are not 100, you will see that there were quite a bit of interest in these foreclosure auctions. The fact of that proposition is the fact that, again, if it's a $100 bid, that means it went back to the plaintiff with no upbidding. If there are other numbers in there, 19,000, 84,000, 270,000, that means that that particular foreclosure auction was bid up by a third party. And if you scroll down this list here, you will see fairly significant and sizable numbers in there, 97,000, 116,000, 122,000. But again, what is most disturbing about this list is that despite the fact that those numbers got bid up fairly significantly, all of those went back to the banks. There is a reason why the banks are electing not to take this real money. Those numbers there reflect the liquidation value of properties, but they're not going back to third-party bidders. All of these properties have gone back to plaintiffs for what are significant bids there. So this is something that we need to be focused on, because there is a perversion in the marketplace which is preventing a real process from taking foot here. Now, another key factor that I want to look at, and that is, one of the great lies in the foreclosure marketplace in this public debate is that our courts are not efficiently processing their sales. And that's just not the case. If you look at column B under any sorting, and focus on the second number there, you will note that that number is the date beginning at the top there. It's 52-2010. That number 2010 is the year it was filed. Below that, 2011. Now, just scrolling down there and making a rough sort of things, you can see that we got many sales that were filed in 2010, many cases that were filed in 2011, 2009, but this is a repudiation of this misinformation out there that somehow our courts aren't doing their job effectively, or that the marketplace isn't working, or that the court system is not working, because you can see in these numbers, 707 sales, a great majority of those cases are 2010, 2011 cases. Now, there's, again, something very wrong here that people are not focusing on. The second data set is an Excel spreadsheet which shows the foreclosure auctions that are scheduled in Pinellas County March 18th to April 30th, 2011. Again, if you sort this, you can see scrolling across the top there what the final judgment amount is, $189,000, $220,000. And then the column G is the assessed value of the property, and column H is the plaintiff that's holding the judgments in all these cases. Now, what's most disturbing is comparing column E to column G. You see that the final judgments are grossly out of whack with the assessed value of the properties. This is truly what the problem in this country right now is. If we totaled up the total column E, or those judgments, in the millions of dollars, and then compare that with column G, the assessed value of the properties. That's the negative equity that exists in Pinellas County right now. Extrapolate that out across the state and frankly across the country, you see what a real mess we're in, because those numbers are just completely out of whack. Now, the final judgment amount is a figure that will never be collected. In this delusion that our financial system operates in right now, that somehow there's some meaning to that number, is the great problem. The assessed values are roughly correct, it seems, and you compare that assessed value of property to the final judgment figure, you see how grossly out of whack things are. But here's where this next data set is most compelling. And that is, if you scroll over to column J, this shows what the plaintiff's maximum bid is. You see that in all of these sales, the banks, all these institutions that were in such a rush to throw Floridians out into the streets, are setting what their maximum bid price is. And you will note that that bid price is most often the final judgment amount. It bears absolutely no relationship to the assessed value of the properties. Now, they may change that bid price at some point in time, but if we compare this data set to the auction results from January 1 to February 2009, where we saw that the great majority of houses were going back to the plaintiffs, that provides some validity to the fact that the assertion that the final judgment amount is what their maximum bid amount will be. Again, the problem that exists here is these banks and institutions, which are so quick to throw Floridians out into the street, are bidding up these properties to the maximum bid amount rather than letting the marketplace determine what is the value of properties. This is truly the subject that people need to be focused on, is the final judgment of foreclosure amounts and what's happening in the foreclosure sales, not what's happening with new foreclosure filings.